The restaurant was alive with the usual sounds of clinking plates, soft chatter, and the low hum of background music. It was one of those elegant places where people came not just to eat but to feel important for a few hours. The lighting was soft, casting a warm glow on polished wooden tables, and the air smelled faintly of fresh bread and rich sauces. Waiters moved with practiced ease, balancing trays and offering polite smiles to each guest. It was a busy evening, and the staff were alert, making sure every detail was perfect. Then, the doors opened and a sudden hush fell over the room, though only for a moment. A man stepped inside with an air that demanded attention. He was tall and impeccably dressed, exuding a sense of power that was almost tangible. Even from across the room, his presence made people notice him. He walked quickly, scanning the restaurant as if measuring everything in it: the decor, the staff, the patrons. He didn't speak, but the sharpness in his eyes sent a clear message. He was not someone to be taken lightly. The staff immediately recognized that this was not an ordinary customer. Whispers passed quietly among the team. They had seen his name before, read about him in magazines, or heard his reputation. He was a billionaire, someone whose life most people could only imagine in dreams. And with that reputation came the expectation that nothing in the restaurant could go wrong tonight. The head waiter stepped forward to greet him, offering a polite bow. The billionaire gave a curt nod, his eyes scanning the menu quickly. He spoke a few words in Japanese, and there was a pause. The waiter's face tightened slightly. None of the staff spoke Japanese fluently. The billionaire's expression hardened, a flash of irritation crossing his face. He tried again, this time speaking more firmly, and the tension in the room increased. It was clear that he expected the staff to understand him immediately. The other diners noticed the subtle shift in energy. Conversations grew quieter as people watched the exchange. Some leaned slightly forward in curiosity, trying to catch glimpses of what was happening. The restaurant, which had been comfortably busy, suddenly felt smaller and more intense. Every movement of the staff was now under scrutiny, and the billionaire's impatient energy seemed to ripple through the room. The waiter tried to explain, using gestures and broken phrases, but the billionaire was clearly growing more frustrated. His frown deepened, and he tapped his fingers on the edge of the menu, a sharp, impatient rhythm that made it impossible for anyone not to notice. He looked around the table, trying to find someone who might understand him. The staff exchanged nervous glances, feeling the pressure mounting. They had dealt with difficult customers before, but there was something different about this man. His anger was subtle at first but unmistakable, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The billionaire's assistant, who had been silent until now, leaned in to try and help. She whispered something in Japanese, hoping to calm the situation, but he shook his head sharply. The assistant looked worried, realizing that the language barrier was more than just an inconvenience. It was a challenge that could escalate quickly. The other staff continued to hover nearby, ready to step in but unsure how to proceed. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Meanwhile, the kitchen staff had begun preparing dishes, anticipating what might be needed. Orders were called out, but without clear communication, there was a risk of mistakes. Each time a plate was brought to the table, the billionaire examined it with a critical eye, his body language showing both expectation and dissatisfaction. He was not someone who tolerated error, and everyone in the restaurant could feel the weight of his scrutiny. As minutes passed, the billionaire's frustration became more visible. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and sighed audibly. His eyes scanned the room, and he muttered something under his breath in Japanese, which no one could understand. The waiter tried to remain composed, speaking slowly and pointing to menu items, but it was clear that he was only increasing the billionaire's irritation. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the storm to break. From a corner of the restaurant, a young waitress watched the scene unfold. She had been serving tables for only a few months, still learning the rhythm and flow of the busy dining area. She noticed the tension in the billionaire's posture, the sharpness of his gaze, and the way the staff were moving cautiously around him. She felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. Something about the situation called to her, a feeling that perhaps she could make a difference. She remained in the background, observing quietly, waiting for the right moment to act. The billionaire's voice rose slightly, a clear sign of his growing impatience. He gestured to the menu again, and it was obvious that he wanted something very specific. The waiter, feeling increasingly flustered, tried another approach, offering suggestions in broken phrases and hand gestures. But nothing worked. The billionaire shook his head, frowning deeper, and the room seemed to tense with him. Patrons nearby exchanged worried looks, wondering what might happen next. As the minutes stretched on, it became clear that the usual methods of service would not suffice. The staff were competent, polite, and attentive, but the language barrier was a wall that none of them could climb. The billionaire's anger, while not explosive yet, was simmering just below the surface. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted from pleasant to charged, and everyone could feel it. The young waitress, still watching from her station, felt a spark of determination. She had studied Japanese in school and had practiced quietly over the years, though she had never used it in a real-life situation like this. She understood that this was more than just taking an order. It was about calming a tense situation and providing the service that was expected at the highest level. Her heart raced, but she felt a strange calm settle over her. She knew she had the ability to help. Taking a deep breath, she began to make her way toward the billionaire's table. Her steps were measured, her expression calm and respectful. She carried herself with confidence, even as the eyes of the entire restaurant seemed to follow her. The staff whispered to each other, some in disbelief, wondering if she could really handle the situation. She reached the table and bowed politely, greeting him in fluent Japanese. The billionaire paused, looking at her with surprise, clearly not expecting someone to speak his language so effortlessly. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the billionaire's frown softened slightly. He repeated his request, testing her understanding, and she responded perfectly, showing not just comprehension but also politeness and attention to detail. The tension in the room began to shift, imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably. Other diners relaxed slightly, sensing that the storm might be averted. The head waiter watched in awe as the young waitress continued to handle the interaction with grace. Her ability to speak Japanese fluently, combined with her calm demeanor, was transforming the situation. The billionaire's posture relaxed, his gestures became less sharp, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The restaurant, which had been tense and uncertain moments ago, was now filled with a sense of relief and admiration. And so, the evening that had begun with frustration and confusion slowly started to change course. All because one person had stepped forward with confidence, skill, and a willingness to act. The young waitress had not only understood the billionaire's words, but had also understood the subtle art of easing tension and providing service at the highest level. The first part of the story ended with a sense of hope and anticipation, leaving everyone in the restaurant curious to see what would happen next. The tension in the restaurant lingered even after the young waitress had approached the billionaire. His eyes, still sharp and calculating, followed every movement around the table. He spoke again in Japanese, and though the staff around him could not understand a word, the waitress did. She listened carefully, her calm presence a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the other employees. She repeated his order back to him in Japanese, politely and accurately. The billionaire's frown softened, though only slightly. He watched her closely, as if testing whether this was a one-time coincidence or whether she truly understood him. The waiter and other staff nearby exchanged amazed glances. They had never seen a customer with such high expectations react so quickly to someone's skill. There was a mix of relief and admiration in their eyes. The billionaire's assistant leaned closer, whispering something to him in Japanese. He nodded, then gestured toward the menu, indicating that he wanted something more complex than the usual dishes. The waitress listened carefully, asking a few clarifying questions in perfect Japanese, and he responded, seeming to appreciate her attention to detail. She smiled slightly, nodding as she confirmed his order. The billionaire's posture relaxed marginally, his shoulders less rigid, though his sharp gaze remained. As the waitress walked back toward the kitchen to relay the order, the staff murmured among themselves. They were impressed not just by her language skills but by the way she handled a tense situation. She moved with quiet confidence, keeping her movements precise and respectful. The head waiter followed closely, ensuring everything would be prepared correctly. The kitchen staff were slightly nervous, aware that the billionaire's order was more complicated than usual, but they trusted the young waitress to communicate it perfectly. While the dishes were being prepared, the billionaire began observing the restaurant more closely. He looked at the other diners, the table settings, and the decor. His attention to detail was sharp, and even a small flaw might have annoyed him. But the calm and competent way the waitress had handled his order seemed to have shifted his mood just enough to make him more patient. He leaned back slightly, tapping his fingers less aggressively, a subtle sign that his anger was beginning to dissipate. The other diners, meanwhile, could not help but notice the change in the atmosphere. The restaurant had been tense and almost silent during the initial confusion, but now there was a sense of anticipation and curiosity. People whispered quietly, speculating about what had happened. Some recognized the billionaire from news articles or social media, and they were intrigued to see how this unusual situation was being resolved. The young waitress returned to the table with a tray of drinks, greeting him politely in Japanese. He acknowledged her with a slight nod, his expression softening further. She served him carefully, ensuring that each cup was placed correctly and that nothing spilled. The billionaire examined the drinks, then sipped one and seemed satisfied. It was a small victory, but it was significant in this high-pressure moment. The staff around the table felt a wave of relief. The situation was moving in a positive direction. Orders began to be prepared in the kitchen. The chefs followed the instructions the waitress had relayed, and she checked each dish before it left the kitchen. Her attention to detail was impeccable, ensuring that the billionaire's complex preferences were met. When the first plate arrived at the table, she explained it in Japanese, indicating what each item was and how it had been prepared. The billionaire's eyes widened slightly in appreciation, and a rare smile appeared on his face. The staff nearby exchanged impressed glances, realizing that her skill and composure were remarkable. The meal continued, and the billionaire's mood improved steadily. He spoke in Japanese occasionally, asking questions about the ingredients or the cooking methods. The waitress responded confidently, providing clear answers and polite suggestions. Each interaction further eased the tension in the room. The other diners noticed the change, some smiling quietly at the smooth resolution of what could have been an uncomfortable scene. The young waitress moved around the table with grace, anticipating his needs before he even asked. She refilled drinks, adjusted plates, and ensured everything was in perfect order. Her calm and respectful manner had a calming effect not only on the billionaire but also on the entire staff. The head waiter observed her carefully, noting how she handled the pressure without showing any sign of stress. It was clear that her skill went beyond language. She understood the subtle art of making a demanding customer feel respected and satisfied. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, now more relaxed than he had been when he first arrived. He seemed to be observing not just the food but the way it was being served. Every movement of the waitress, every gesture, and every word in Japanese reassured him that the evening was proceeding correctly. The staff began to relax as well, realizing that the tension had eased significantly. The restaurant, once filled with nervous energy, now had a sense of calm efficiency. The young waitress continued to interact with him, answering questions and explaining details about the dishes. She anticipated his preferences, suggesting additional items politely and explaining why they complemented the main dishes. The billionaire listened attentively, nodding occasionally and showing signs of approval. His earlier irritation had transformed into a quiet appreciation. The staff around them watched closely, learning from her approach and realizing the impact of confidence and competence in handling difficult situations. As the meal progressed, the billionaire occasionally spoke to his assistant in Japanese, pointing out details or asking questions. The waitress responded with ease, translating or clarifying when necessary. Her presence had become essential to the smooth flow of the dinner. Other diners watched in quiet admiration, some recognizing the rarity of such a skill in a high-pressure dining environment. By the time the main course arrived, the billionaire was visibly calmer. His sharp gestures and impatient taps had disappeared, replaced by a composed and attentive demeanor. He engaged briefly with the waitress, asking about her experience and background in Japanese. She answered politely, keeping the conversation light and professional. The interaction was respectful, and it left a positive impression on him. The staff felt a sense of pride, seeing one of their own handle such a challenging situation with skill and grace. The young waitress continued to monitor every detail, checking the table regularly, ensuring that everything met his expectations. The billionaire responded with subtle nods and quiet words of approval in Japanese. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted completely from the initial tension to a sense of calm professionalism. The other diners, who had been observing quietly, now whispered among themselves in admiration, impressed by the young waitress's ability to manage a difficult customer. The head waiter, who had been supervising closely, approached the young waitress discreetly. He gave her a slight nod of approval, acknowledging the way she had handled the situation. The kitchen staff, too, felt a sense of relief, knowing that their efforts were guided by someone who understood the billionaire's needs perfectly. It was clear that her skill and composure had not only resolved a tense situation but also elevated the overall experience in the restaurant. As the dessert was served, the billionaire smiled slightly, a rare and small gesture that spoke volumes. He complimented the meal in Japanese, and the waitress responded with a polite bow and a warm smile. The tension that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a sense of satisfaction and quiet admiration. The staff and diners alike felt the change, recognizing the young waitress's role in transforming what could have been a disastrous evening into a memorable and positive experience. The evening continued smoothly, with the billionaire finishing his meal without further incident. The young waitress remained attentive, ensuring that each final detail was perfect. The staff around her admired her skill and professionalism, noting how she had handled a situation that could have easily gone wrong. The restaurant, once tense and uncertain, was now filled with a sense of calm efficiency and quiet admiration. The young waitress had proven that confidence, skill, and a respectful approach could turn even the most challenging situation into a success. The second part of the story closed with a feeling of anticipation, leaving everyone curious about what would happen next as the billionaire's experience continued to unfold. The young waitress had become the quiet center of attention at the billionaire's table. While the other staff continued their duties with careful movements, she stayed focused on him, anticipating every gesture and request. Her eyes followed his hands as he moved the menu. Her ears caught the soft tone of his voice in Japanese, and her mind worked quickly to interpret and respond. She remained calm, giving the impression that she had handled such situations countless times, even though this was a first for her at this level of intensity. The billionaire leaned slightly forward, speaking again in Japanese. The words came quickly with a sharpness that showed he expected precision. The waitress nodded, responding with equal clarity and politeness. The billionaire's eyes widened slightly, a flash of surprise and approval crossing his face. He repeated a few of the instructions, making sure she understood perfectly, and she did. Each exchange was smooth, controlled, and professional. The tension that had filled the restaurant earlier was slowly giving way to a sense of admiration for her skill. Other diners watched quietly, intrigued by the unusual interaction. Some whispered softly, marveling at the young waitress's ability to communicate fluently in Japanese while maintaining her composure. The billionaire's presence, once intimidating, now seemed less severe as he engaged in the conversation with a sense of curiosity rather than pure frustration. His frown had softened into a look of careful attention, and even the way he held his hands and leaned in suggested that he was assessing her competence, not preparing to unleash anger. The head waiter and other staff observed silently from nearby, learning from her method. She did not rush, she did not appear flustered, and she never raised her voice. Her calm energy was contagious, helping the rest of the restaurant maintain a quiet efficiency. Plates moved smoothly from the kitchen to the table, drinks were refilled promptly, and every small detail was attended to without drawing unnecessary attention. The young waitress had transformed the atmosphere, not through authority or command, but through poise, confidence, and attention to detail. The billionaire's assistant occasionally leaned in to offer guidance, whispering brief clarifications in Japanese. The waitress responded, politely confirming and adjusting as needed. It was clear she was not only understanding the words but also the intent behind them. She anticipated the billionaire's preferences, suggesting slight modifications to dishes, and he nodded in approval. This subtle exchange showed a deep understanding of both language and service etiquette, elevating the experience far above a typical restaurant interaction. The billionaire leaned back, observing the restaurant around him with a more relaxed posture. He spoke softly to his assistant, pointing out minor details, and the waitress translated with precision. She ensured that his words were interpreted accurately for the staff, and that the response was delivered in a way that maintained his satisfaction. The careful balance of communication and service created a rhythm, a quiet dance between customer and staff that made the evening flow smoothly despite its complexity. Other diners now watched with fascination rather than curiosity. They were witnessing a rare moment, a high-profile, demanding individual being met with patience, skill, and respect. The young waitress had become the bridge between worlds, making the billionaire feel understood without compromising the calm of the restaurant. Patrons whispered quietly, noting how such competence could turn a tense and potentially embarrassing situation into a display of grace and professionalism. The meal progressed, and the billionaire occasionally asked for more specific details about ingredients or preparation techniques. The waitress explained carefully, in polite and fluent Japanese, giving just enough information to satisfy his curiosity without overwhelming him. Her manner was professional, warm, and reassuring, which seemed to surprise him. He had likely encountered many servers, but few who could handle his expectations with such effortless skill. Each exchange built mutual respect, even if it was unspoken. The head waiter quietly approached, observing how she handled the interaction. He noted her subtle gestures, the way she maintained eye contact, and her ability to anticipate needs. The other staff also noticed, and some whispered encouragements to each other. It was clear that her performance was not just impressive, it was exemplary. She had become the linchpin of the evening, ensuring that the billionaire's experience met the high standards expected of a person of his status. At one point, the billionaire placed a complicated request, a combination of dishes and modifications that would challenge any waiter. The young waitress paused briefly, her mind racing through the options, then confirmed each detail in Japanese. The billionaire's eyes narrowed slightly, testing her comprehension. She responded clearly and politely, and he nodded slowly, a small smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. The moment was subtle but significant, a quiet acknowledgement of her capability and understanding. The other diners noticed the subtle shift. The once tense atmosphere was now filled with a quiet admiration. Some leaned forward, watching the interaction with interest, while others whispered softly about how impressive it was to see someone handle such a demanding customer so gracefully. The young waitress had not only managed a challenging situation but had also elevated the experience for everyone in the room. The billionaire's assistant whispered something briefly in Japanese, and the waitress responded with a nod and a soft smile. She moved efficiently to relay the message to the kitchen, ensuring that the order would be prepared exactly as requested. Her calm and precise communication kept the flow seamless. The kitchen staff, previously anxious, now worked with quiet confidence, trusting her judgment and clarity. The entire restaurant operated in a synchronized rhythm, guided by her quiet competence. As the main courses were served, the billionaire examined each plate carefully. The young waitress described each dish in Japanese, explaining the ingredients and the way they were prepared. He tasted the food and nodded with approval, a rare and quiet gesture of satisfaction. The staff felt a wave of relief. The situation that had begun with tension and potential disaster was now unfolding smoothly, thanks to her skill and poise. During the meal, the billionaire occasionally spoke in Japanese about his preferences and observations. The waitress responded effortlessly, translating where needed and ensuring that his wishes were clearly understood by the staff. She maintained a calm demeanor, never showing stress or frustration. Her patience and attentiveness continued to impress not only the billionaire but also everyone observing the interaction. Her ability to manage complex communication in real time highlighted her intelligence and professionalism. The head waiter watched closely, learning from her approach. He noted her subtle gestures, the way she anticipated questions, and her ability to maintain composure under pressure. The other staff were inspired by her performance, realizing that skill, confidence, and a calm presence could transform a challenging encounter into a smooth and positive experience. The restaurant had become a stage, and she had become the silent conductor of a finely tuned performance. The billionaire's demeanor had shifted further. He was no longer tense or fuming. Instead, he appeared curious and engaged. His interactions with the waitress were polite, precise, and respectful. Each word, each gesture, each careful action reinforced a growing mutual understanding. The young waitress had earned his trust without demanding it, simply through competence, attention, and the quiet power of her calm presence. By the end of the main course, the billionaire was visibly more relaxed. He spoke less sharply, gestured less aggressively, and even smiled occasionally. The young waitress continued to serve him with the same care and professionalism, ensuring that every detail met his high standards. The staff around them felt a sense of pride and admiration, knowing that she had turned a potentially disastrous evening into a remarkable display of skill and poise. The other diners, once tense and curious, were now quietly observing with respect. They had witnessed a rare example of high-pressure service handled flawlessly. The young waitress had become the quiet hero of the evening, her calm competence transforming the experience not only for the billionaire but for everyone present. The third part of the story closed with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation, leaving everyone eager to see how the evening would conclude and what final impression she would leave on the billionaire. The young waitress continued to move around the billionaire's table with a calm and purposeful demeanor. Every action she took was precise and measured, from refilling glasses to adjusting the placement of plates. The billionaire, who had begun the evening with a sharp frown and impatient gestures, now watched her with a quiet, intense focus. His earlier anger had dissipated, replaced by a mixture of curiosity and cautious approval. Each interaction between them was like a carefully choreographed dance, with the waitress guiding the flow without forcing it. She spoke in fluent Japanese, responding to his questions about the ingredients, preparation, and presentation of each dish. The billionaire listened carefully, occasionally nodding or giving a subtle smile. His tone, once sharp and commanding, had softened into something more thoughtful and attentive. The staff nearby could hardly believe the transformation. The tension that had gripped the restaurant just moments before had completely shifted, and it was all because of the young waitress's calm competence. The assistant, who had been quietly observing the interaction, leaned in to whisper a clarification in Japanese. The waitress nodded, quickly confirming the instructions and relaying them to the kitchen with exact precision. Her ability to handle multiple layers of communication simultaneously impressed everyone around her. She was not only translating language but also managing expectations, ensuring that every detail met the billionaire's high standards. Other diners watched with fascination as the evening continued. They had come to the restaurant for a pleasant dinner, but now they were witnessing something remarkable. A difficult, high-profile customer had entered the restaurant, and the young waitress had turned what could have been a tense and stressful situation into a smooth and impressive performance. Her poise, confidence, and skill had captivated everyone, even those who were not directly involved in the interaction. The billionaire leaned back slightly, observing the restaurant and the staff with a more relaxed posture. He spoke quietly in Japanese, asking about a particular dish and its origin. The waitress responded with clarity and respect, giving enough information to satisfy his curiosity while keeping the conversation professional. Her ability to anticipate his needs and provide answers without hesitation impressed him further. He began to trust her judgment, relying on her guidance for the rest of the evening. As the main courses were cleared, the billionaire gestured for dessert. The waitress approached, offering suggestions in Japanese. She described the ingredients, flavors, and textures, helping him make a choice that matched his taste preferences. He nodded in approval, appreciating her attention to detail and the way she presented the options. The staff around the table felt a sense of relief and admiration. The situation that had begun with frustration and confusion was now a display of professionalism and skill. The dessert arrived, and the waitress carefully explained each item in Japanese, noting the subtle differences in flavor and presentation. The billionaire tasted each dish, giving subtle signs of approval. He spoke quietly to his assistant, and the waitress translated and confirmed the instructions for the staff. Her calm presence ensured that everything ran smoothly, even during the final stages of the meal. The restaurant, once tense, now had a sense of quiet efficiency and respect. The billionaire's demeanor had shifted completely. He no longer displayed impatience or irritation. Instead, he appeared engaged, thoughtful, and quietly impressed. He asked a few questions about the preparation and presentation, and the waitress responded with confidence and accuracy. Each exchange strengthened the unspoken connection between them, built on competence, respect, and professionalism. The staff and other diners watched in quiet admiration, recognizing the rare skill it took to manage such a demanding guest with grace. Throughout the evening, the waitress remained attentive to every detail. She refilled drinks, adjusted plates, and ensured that the table was perfectly arranged. Her calm and composed manner reassured the billionaire, allowing him to relax and enjoy his meal. The staff around her followed her lead, moving efficiently and quietly, guided by her example. The atmosphere in the restaurant had transformed from tense and uncertain to calm, professional, and even elegant. The billionaire began to speak in Japanese about his experience at the restaurant, his tone more relaxed and engaged. He asked about the ingredients, preparation, and the story behind each dish. The waitress responded with thoughtful and accurate answers, providing just enough detail to satisfy his curiosity without overwhelming him. Her professionalism and knowledge impressed him further, earning his quiet respect. The interaction was no longer about frustration or anger. It was about understanding, appreciation, and smooth communication. Other diners continued to observe, some whispering quietly about how remarkable the situation had become. They had witnessed a transformation. A highly demanding customer had entered the restaurant angry and impatient, and a young waitress had handled him with skill, patience, and poise. Her ability to speak Japanese flawlessly, anticipate needs, and maintain composure under pressure had captivated everyone present. It was a demonstration of how confidence, skill, and calmness could change the course of an evening. As the dessert was enjoyed, the billionaire leaned back, clearly satisfied with his meal and the service. He gestured subtly, and the waitress responded immediately, adjusting a small detail on the table without being asked. Her attention to even the smallest elements impressed him. She had not only met his expectations but had exceeded them, earning his trust and quiet admiration. The staff around them felt a sense of pride and respect, recognizing the exceptional performance they had just witnessed. The assistant whispered something briefly in Japanese, and the waitress confirmed and relayed the instructions to the staff. Her ability to manage complex communication and multiple tasks simultaneously ensured that everything continued smoothly. The kitchen staff, previously tense, now worked with confidence, knowing that the young waitress had a firm understanding of the billionaire's preferences. The restaurant operated like a well-oiled machine, guided by her calm and capable presence. The billionaire's mood had shifted completely. He was no longer tense, impatient, or frustrated. Instead, he was engaged, appreciative, and quietly impressed. He continued to interact with the waitress, asking questions and receiving thoughtful answers. Each exchange strengthened the trust and respect between them. The young waitress had transformed a potentially stressful evening into a seamless, professional, and memorable experience. As the meal concluded, the billionaire gave a subtle nod of approval, his expression calm and satisfied. He had experienced the skill, poise, and professionalism of the young waitress firsthand. The staff and other diners around the room could sense the change, recognizing the rare talent on display. The young waitress had not only managed the situation successfully, but had also left a lasting impression on everyone present. The evening ended with the billionaire finishing his meal without any further incident. The young waitress remained attentive until the very last moment, ensuring that everything was perfect. Her calm and confident approach had transformed a challenging situation into a memorable success. The staff around her felt a sense of pride and inspiration, knowing that her skill, patience, and professionalism had made all the difference. The fourth part of the story closed with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation, leaving everyone eager to see the final resolution and the lasting impression she would leave on the billionaire. The final part of the evening began with the billionaire leaning back in his chair, his expression calm and satisfied. The tension that had gripped the restaurant earlier had completely melted away, replaced by a sense of admiration and quiet respect. The young waitress continued her attentive service, moving around the table with the same calm and precise manner she had displayed throughout the evening. Every gesture, every word, and every small action was carefully measured, ensuring that the billionaire's experience remained flawless. He spoke softly in Japanese, asking about a small detail in the dessert presentation. The waitress responded immediately, explaining clearly and politely, while confirming that the staff would adjust it according to his preference. Her fluency and composure had transformed a potential moment of irritation into a smooth and seamless experience. The billionaire nodded slightly, acknowledging her skill and precision. His eyes, which had once flashed with impatience, now carried a quiet respect. Other diners continued to observe, intrigued by the transformation that had taken place. They whispered softly among themselves, noting how a potentially stressful situation had been managed with such professionalism and calm. The young waitress had become the quiet hero of the evening, her skill and confidence turning a demanding and impatient billionaire into a satisfied and appreciative guest. The staff, too, were in awe, recognizing that her ability to handle such a high-pressure scenario was extraordinary. The billionaire's assistant leaned in briefly, whispering a few instructions in Japanese. The waitress listened carefully, confirming each detail and ensuring that the staff understood precisely what was required. Her ability to handle multiple streams of communication simultaneously was impressive. She was not just translating words. She was interpreting intentions and managing expectations. Every action she took reinforced the calm and professional atmosphere in the restaurant. As the last course was served, the billionaire examined it with careful attention. The waitress explained the ingredients, preparation, and presentation in polite Japanese, highlighting the subtle flavors and techniques used. He listened intently, occasionally nodding and giving subtle signs of approval. The staff watched quietly, sensing the satisfaction radiating from the billionaire. The restaurant, which had started the evening under stress and tension, had been transformed into a place of smooth efficiency and quiet admiration. The young waitress continued to monitor the table, ensuring that every small detail was attended to. She refilled drinks, adjusted plates, and answered questions with grace and accuracy. The billionaire's demeanor remained calm and engaged, a testament to her skill and poise. Each interaction strengthened the unspoken connection between them, built on respect, competence, and attentive service. At one point, the billionaire asked a few questions about the origins of certain dishes and their preparation techniques. The waitress responded confidently, giving detailed but concise explanations. He nodded, clearly impressed by her knowledge and ability to communicate effectively. Her skill extended beyond language. She understood the nuances of service, presentation, and human interaction. The way she anticipated his needs and addressed them before he even asked created a sense of seamless service that few could achieve. The staff around them observed closely, learning from her example. They noticed how she maintained eye contact, how she listened carefully, and how she responded with both accuracy and warmth. Her calm presence had a ripple effect, guiding the rest of the team and ensuring that the restaurant operated smoothly even under the pressure of a high-profile guest. Her professionalism had transformed the atmosphere, turning a potentially chaotic situation into a model of efficiency and poise. Other diners remained quietly attentive, some leaning forward slightly in curiosity, while others whispered softly in admiration. They recognized the rarity of the moment, A demanding, impatient billionaire being met with such calm, competent, and respectful service. The young waitress had become the bridge between worlds, her skill ensuring that both the guest and the restaurant staff experienced a seamless and positive evening. The billionaire leaned back, visibly relaxed and satisfied. He spoke softly in Japanese, making a small compliment about the meal. The waitress responded with a polite bow and a warm smile, acknowledging his words without overstepping her professional role. The gesture, simple as it was, reinforced the sense of mutual respect and understanding. The staff felt a wave of pride, realizing that their young colleague had turned a challenging evening into a memorable and successful experience. As the evening drew to a close, the billionaire requested the check. The waitress approached, confirming the details in Japanese, and ensured that everything was accurate. She presented the check with a polite bow, maintaining her calm and professional demeanor. The billionaire examined it, then looked at her and nodded in approval. He reached into his wallet and left an exceptionally generous tip, a gesture of his appreciation for her skill and composure. Before leaving, he handed a small note to the waitress. She opened it carefully, reading the single word written in clear Japanese, "Respect." Her eyes widened slightly, understanding the depth of the message. It was a rare acknowledgement from someone of his stature, recognizing not just her service but her skill, confidence, and ability to manage a complex situation with poise. The moment was quiet yet profoundly meaningful. The billionaire's assistant whispered a final message in Japanese, thanking her on behalf of the guest. The waitress responded politely, bowing and expressing her gratitude for the opportunity to serve. The staff around the table were in awe, realizing that the young waitress had achieved something extraordinary. She had not only met the high expectations of a billionaire but had exceeded them, leaving a lasting impression that would be remembered by everyone present. The other diners quietly returned to their own meals, some smiling as they reflected on what they had just witnessed. The restaurant, once tense and anxious, now carried a sense of calm satisfaction. The young waitress returned to her station, maintaining her humility despite the recognition she had received. She continued her duties with the same attention to detail, ensuring that the rest of the restaurant ran smoothly. Her quiet confidence and professionalism had left a lasting impression on both the billionaire and her colleagues. The head waiter approached her briefly, giving a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The kitchen staff exchanged glances, feeling inspired by the performance they had witnessed. The young waitress had demonstrated that skill, composure, and respect could transform a high-pressure situation into a seamless and memorable experience. She had not only provided excellent service but had also shown the power of confidence, understanding, and calmness in the face of challenge. As the billionaire left the restaurant, he gave one last nod of appreciation to the young waitress. Her eyes met his, and she offered a polite bow and a warm smile. The staff and diners felt the significance of the moment, understanding that they had witnessed a rare display of professionalism and human connection. The young waitress had not only served a meal, but had created an experience that would be remembered by everyone involved. The restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the evening lingered. The young waitress continued her work, quietly proud yet humble, knowing that she had handled a remarkable situation with grace and skill. The billionaire's visit had tested her abilities, and she had risen to the challenge, proving that confidence, competence, and calmness could create a lasting impression even on the most demanding of guests. The final part of the story closed with a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment, leaving the audience with the understanding that dedication and professionalism can truly transform any situation.